Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's session of Future Forward, Be Cyber Aware and Secure, Understanding Cybersecurity Insurance in today's market and kind of the threat that's posed there. I want to say thank you to our sponsors, which are Tech Guru, Swissnet, and Devo by Avalara. Also want to say thank you to Rob Ferrini with McGowan Pro for joining us. Before I turn it over to him, however, and let him give his bio, I do just have a couple of housekeeping items that I need to make sure we go over. Pull up my cheat sheet so I don't miss anything. Excuse me. So CPE is available for this session. So you must be, just like with any other CPE, online CPE, you have to be in the session for 50 minutes, 50 minutes. You must answer 3 polling questions, and that's all we have is 3 polling questions. So you've got to answer them all if you want your CPE. If you meet the minimum requirement, which is doing those 2 things, you will receive an email with a link to a short survey. It's like a 3-question survey just about this session. Complete that survey and the certificate will be emailed to you. A recording of this session will be posted to our YouTube channel, which I will put in the chat. It usually takes us about 2 days to get those posted. The slide deck, Rob, am I good to share this slide deck with people once you start rolling?
Sure.
Okay.
No problem there.
Yep, I'll put that in the chat as Rob is talking. Then if you have questions that come up, put them in the Q&A box there at probably down in the bottom of your screen. We will attempt to get to those. If you do have a question and it's real specific to something that Rob said, please include that in the question. So if he says, something about topic A, make sure you say, this is about topic A, here's my question. That way, if we don't get to the questions until the end, we have a reference from which that question was asked. So with that said, I am going to go ahead and turn this over to Rob, and then I'll put those things in the chat, and I'm going to go off screen. Thanks, Rob.
Okay.
Appreciate you being here.
All right. Thanks so much for having me today. I appreciate it. And I appreciate everybody coming to join me today. So I am the Cyber Liability Program Manager for McGowan Pro. And we have been in the business for about 35 years, and we deal specifically with professional service firms, mainly accounting firms, bookkeepers, tax preparers, but we also work with lawyers and investment advisors. I am a regular presenter on professional liability, risk management, and cyber liability. And this talk today is going to be related to how do you keep coverage, cyber coverage, or how do you get it if you don't have it now, because the market has certainly changed. At McGowan Pro, we started in 1998. And as I said, we work with investment advisors, attorneys, and accountants, and we insure about 7,000 accountants across the country. So we have quite a bit of experience. So please feel free to ask questions as they come up. But I have about 12 slides to go through, a lot of information, and let's get right to it. So today's talk is not really about creating a culture of security. It's important, but hopefully you're already doing that. And it's also not about tips and tricks, but there'll also be some tips and tricks to keep your clients' data safe and secure. Hopefully you've already tightened up some of your security. But as I said, today's talk is about helping your firm qualify for cyber coverage if you don't have it. If you already have coverage, it's going to help you to maintain your coverage. So I'm going to be talking about the risks professional services face today. Some of the risks include ransomware, denial of service attacks. I'm going to talk about the market and how we got here and why we're in the position that we are with insurance for cyber being so difficult to get. And I'm also going to talk about what professional service firms, specifically accounting professionals, what they can do to maintain coverage or to continue to qualify for coverage. So I see a couple of questions here. Let me see if I can answer those. Nope, nothing that I need to be concerned about. So moving on, what risks do professional services firms face? Due to the pandemic, cyber attacks have changed. Since we were in the pandemic for the last 2+ years, we have increased our working from home, and not all firms were prepared for that. And so pretty quickly, hackers took advantage of that. They looked for vulnerabilities and they found those vulnerabilities. And why is it accounting professionals? Why your firms? Most of it is because you have very valuable information. You have lots of juicy stuff. You have tax information, banking information. You have possibly dates of birth and credit card and banking information. And it's not as hard to crack your security as it is maybe a bank, healthcare, some other companies, investment advisors, because they have quite a bit more regulation currently than CPA firms do or tax preparers do. You're very valuable targets. Now, most ransomware attacks, 60%, are small business. And in the study that I'm referencing here, a small business is less than 50 employees. And of those ransom attacks, 60% of the victims of small business was healthcare professional or financial services. So accounting firms, tax preparers, bookkeepers are all high targets. Now, they do use a bunch of different ways to attack: phishing campaigns, social engineering, which is fake emails, brute force attacks, ransomware, misconfiguration or misdelivery. Let me talk about a couple of those, not in any particular order. First, you probably heard of brute force attacks. A brute force attack is basically trial and error. It's a very simple and reliable way to gain access to your data. The hacker tries multiple usernames and passwords, often using computers to test a wide range of combinations, and sometimes they hit on the right thing. So that's a brute force. They just bombard you with stuff to see if they can crack your passwords. The next issue is a dictionary force attack. That uses common words and amended words with special characters and numbers. I'll be talking later about some password hygiene, and they use a bunch of passwords from prior breaches. They just bombard you again with words and your name and whatever information they have to see if they can crack your passwords. And then there's credential stuffing. Credential stuffing is, again, using poor password hygiene. They use collected names and passwords that they bought on the dark web. You can buy 1,000 passwords for about $10 on the dark web. You just have to know how to get to the dark web. You can start your own hacking company if you'd like. Another concern was remote desktop protocol. When the pandemic happened, most firms were using Microsoft's remote desktop protocol, or they were using remote desktop gateway. It was an easy way to just click on your desktop and you'd go right into the server in your office. And it was the predominant way that most remote workers were able to get into the office pre-COVID, and for most of 20 and 21. That's until hackers figured out how to exploit it, and they certainly did. That's one of the major reasons why cyber insurance underwriting, approvals, and loss control requirements changed so much, was because of remote desktop protocol and because of so many people working from home. There were so many brute force attacks to the Microsoft system of remote desktop protocol and gateway that cyber insurance providers will no longer provide coverage if your firm is still using remote desktop protocol or remotely accessing your company through remote desktop protocol. There's a lot of other ways to do it. We'll go through some of those as we go on. But if you're using remote desktop protocol, you won't be able to get insurance, or your policy won't renew if you answer the question on your application, or you use one of the companies that does a scan. Sorry about that. There was also a huge increase in ransomware attacks. I'm sure everybody's heard about ransomware attacks. It's up about 35% in 2021, and the damages rose by more than 250%. A recent report by a cyber insurance provider at Bay said that it's responsible for about 60% of all domestic insurance claims in 2021. Last year, the average ransom payment doubled from what it was in 2020. So the bad guys have figured out how to do ransomware, and they're doing it frequently, and they're doing it a lot. In fact, in 21, attackers made more money by demanding payment but not posting your stolen data than they did from victims who paid the ransom just to get their files decrypted. We at McGowan Pro had a number of claims where the hacker sent emails to our insured's clients telling them that they had been hacked, their accountant had been hacked, and they had to give up their data. They had to expose their data because the accountant wasn't paying the ransom. So they had no choice but to use and post their data. We had a lot of very worried accounting firms when those calls started coming in about what are they supposed to do. We were able to help those people when they had insurance. We were able to give them resources to help them figure out what the issue was and how to fix it. And it is still a big problem. Many victims choose to pay the ransom, but statistically, most get the key and are able to encrypt the data, but 32% on average don't get the key. So you have to pay the ransom, and then you're no better off than you were before. Also, the problem with paying ransom is then you're listing on the dark web as somebody who paid ransom, and now you're just going to get more attention from hackers because you're someone who is willing to pay. Of course, to get the ransom payment, you need to have a crypto wallet. Do you have one? Do you know how to get one? Do you know where it is? And it's very complicated if you have ransomware and you need to figure out how to do the ransomware payments. Most of these attacks do start with phishing emails. Phishing email is an email that's sent to you that is what they call pre-texted, pre-context, and it has some information that might be important to you or somebody you know, or some urgency to it. So it's been something that you might want to look at around this time of the year or coming up in the next couple of months. A lot of pretexting is, hey, take a look at my tax return. I'm thinking about changing my tax provider. So you open the email, it doesn't do anything, doesn't open anything, and you think, oh, I dodged the bullet there. But in actuality, they probably put something on your system and is just waiting to implement it, waiting to weaponize it. So how do we take care of these things? How do we stop these things? And what's going on now? Let's look at the next slide, which is going to talk about what has happened with Microsoft. Microsoft had 83 billion cyber attacks from 11/26/21 through 12/31/21. 9.6 billion threats were blocked. 37 billion were from malicious email blocked. 25.6 billion attempts to hijack accounts by brute force stolen passwords. So nearly a third of all attempts were by brute force stolen passwords. And the last thing there is only 22% of the users across all industries had strong authentication protections. Authentication protections might be VPN, might be multi-factor authentication, might be encrypted backups, all those things that they could have, should have, would have done. Now, the other half of the slide talks about how much it costs to get a ransomware kit, $66. To find out if you want to hire a hacker, you can hire a hacker for only $250. You can get stolen passwords for 97 cents per thousand, or 400 million for only $150. So it's pretty easy to do this if you want to put a little effort into it. And we have to be better. We have to have our security up. We have to have insurance for not the if it happens, but when it happens. And we'll talk about those things coming up. So what's the big deal? The big deal is there are a lot of hacks. This is as of 9/26, and this is just for September. American Airlines on the 20th, Rockstar Games, which is GarageBand, September 18th, Uber, September 15th, a web hosting company on the 14th, U-Haul on the 12th, North Face on the 7th, Holiday Inn on the 6th, Samsung on the 2nd, and 130 companies, including DoorDash, MailChimp, Cloudflare on August 25. So in the last 30 days, these are the hacks that just happened, that happened to be reported. Most are not reported. Bad actors are exploiting firms' lack of security, and there is a lot of it out there. At this point, I think we should start our first poll question. We need to do poll questions to make sure that you qualify for the CE credit. So here's the first poll question. Has your firm experienced a data breach or a ransom attack? Give a couple of minutes for that to be taken care of, and then we'll come back to that in a minute.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up in about 3 more seconds. So if you need the CPE, please participate in that poll, and then I'll share the results here for you, Rob.
Okay. So we have a couple of people who have had a breach, but most of you haven't. So that's a good thing that most of you have not experienced a breach yet. But it is a question of not if, but when a cyber attack happens. So let's talk about cyber insurance for a minute and what has actually happened. So what has happened? A lot has happened over the last 18 months. One is InsurTech. So there's 2 types of insurance companies out there. There are legacy carriers, some that you've probably heard of, maybe Hanover or Travelers or CNA. There's some out there called Beasley Breach Response or Chubb. Those are what I would call legacy, where they insure a whole bunch of different things. They might insure homes and cars and offices and professional services firms and cyber and boats. And they decided to put into their tool bag about 18 years ago cyber insurance, separate cyber insurance, to help companies with this issue. Now, the issue came out to be that these companies didn't have a lot of history on what could happen or what couldn't happen. So they only asked 4 or 5 different questions to see whether you qualified. Almost anybody qualified. You paid the premium and you answered a couple of questions like, do you have a firewall? Do you have some security? Do you have a written security plan? You answer yes to that, and you're all set. They provide you with an insurance policy. Then along came InsurTech. InsurTech companies use artificial intelligence and do risk assessments and scan the web to make sure that the risks are being addressed. They use risk assessments, which go up against your firewall they use your email address, and they use your web address to find out if you have any vulnerabilities, any vectors, or any problems that might come up. And they will provide a assessment. It's about a 10-page assessment that'll tell you all the different areas where you might have a concern. And some insurance companies will say, okay, if you fix these, we'll take care of you. If you don't want to fix these, you can go to somebody else. The problem with the legacy firms 18 months ago was they didn't know what to expect. They didn't have any idea what was going to happen when ransomware hit. They were predicting like they would if it was a house fire or an auto accident. But auto accidents and fires have several hundred years of insurance data, but cyber companies can't predict what the next big risk is because they don't know what the next big risk is. About a year and a half ago, there was a concern for something called Log4j. That was something that software developers used as a tool to make software. There was no indication of what software had it or how it was used or when it was used, but bad guys figured out how to exploit that, and they didn't know what was going to happen. They didn't know how many of their insureds was going to have this problem. They weren't sure how they were going to use it. All they knew was there was chatter in the dark web that this had been breached and that there was a way to hack people without anybody really knowing it. So the insurance company took a drastic measure, and some of them left the business, others increased their price, others changed their controls, requiring much more things to have in place before they would offer you any coverage. So they raised the bar on how to qualify, and it's been quite a problem for the last 18 months or so. Premiums went up 3 or 4 times what they were 2 years ago, some up 5 times what they were a couple of years ago. A lot of industries can't get coverage anymore, and a number of other industries have been made have been priced out of the market. So accountants, because they are high value targets, they put some security measures in place to make sure that you have the right security, so less risk of a hack. So let's talk about better security equaling better insurance coverage. Cyber threat defense require multi-pronged proactive approach. And these bullet points are some of the things that are required or suggested to have. So I'll go through these pretty quick. Apply least access privilege policies. Only give workers access where it's necessary. If you don't need it for your job or your duties, you shouldn't give people access to critical information, specifically Social Security numbers, billing information, account numbers, banking information. Use a security by design approach. Save only what you need. Maintain a strong data retention policy so that you know where it is, who has it, where it's going. Try to get rid of all your paper. I had a client the other day that told me they had 45 years of paper. The problem with paper is you can't prove a negative. If your storage facility gets broken into and you have sensitive information, you have Social Security numbers, you can't prove that they didn't take somebody's data, that they took a picture of it, wrote down their Social Security number, stole their tax return. You can't prove it. So that means that everything has been exposed. Paper is not a good thing to have because you have to report it if you had a break. Save only what's necessary, redact information when possible, return sensitive documents, and reduce access to sensitive data to only those who need it. Test and review your disaster recovery and written information security plan. A lot of these things are in IRS 4557. These are pretty much standard now, the Simple 7 security. If you don't have that, take a look at it. It's IRS 4557, and it gives you a checklist of what you should have and where you should put your effort in securing your data. Now, one thing about 4557 is if you don't have a written information security plan in place, I think it's 2023 tax year, they won't register your PIN number, PTIN number. So the IRS is requiring you to have a written internet security plan. If you don't have one, we can get you a template. It should be reviewed annually because there are some things you're supposed to do. You can just ask us and we can help. Make sure your automatic security updates on your software are on. It's easy to configure and it is a requirement by insurance companies. Perform regular system backups. Make sure it's backing up what you want, what you think it is and what you need, and make sure it's doing it at the frequency you think it is. Also, make sure your backups are encrypted. Insurance companies require encrypted backups. Also use the best practice 3-2-1 rule. 3, create one primary backup and 2 copies of your data. 2, save your backups in 2 different types of media, whether that's online in a tape or online in a flash drive, 2 different types of media, and keep at least 1 backup offsite. So if you have a flash drive, you're going to put it onto your flash drive and you take it with you, that satisfies that. Require remote workers to use a VPN, virtual private network. Virtual private network is basically a tube that connects your computer to the person who's on the other end, and it's a solid tube, theoretically, a solid tube that's impenetrable from the outside. If you're not using a VPN, it just goes out into anywhere and somebody might be able to see it or get it. But if it's in a VPN, they can't get it. They can't look at your data while it's going from one end to the other. Prying eyes can't see it. Secure your employees' passwords. Make sure they're secure. Weak and compromised passwords are the biggest threat to organizational cybersecurity. Poor employee password habits are behind most breaches. And lastly, you have to use multi-factor authentication to be able to get insurance. Multi-factor authentication has to be on remote access, and it has to be on your email. Any remote access to client information, personally identifiable information, I should say, should be with a multi-factor authentication. Well, those of you who don't know what multi-factor authentication is, it means something you have and something you know. Newer computer systems from Microsoft have Windows Hello that uses biometrics. That's the little touchpad on your laptop, touches your fingerprint. You could use a token, which is you plug in something like a flash drive, and it allows you to access. It can be your cell phone. Most people use their cell phone. Your cell phone gets a notice. You punch in the code that your cell phone sent into your laptop, and it opens up your system. It deters hackers from requiring more than one layer. It's kind of like, for those people of a certain age, the club back in the 80s and 90s. I think they still sell it today. But back in the day, they used to sell a club, and all it was a piece of steel with 2 hooks on it that you attached to your steering wheel. Now, it was very easy to overcome. You could just use a hacksaw, you could use a bolt cutter, you could cut through the steering wheel, and the bad guy would be on its way. But what happened was the bad guy would walk down the street and look at the cars that had a club and those who didn't have a club. The ones who didn't have a club, they walked past. That's the same thing with your passwords. The bad guys look for passwords of less than 12 characters. They look for people that don't have multi-factor authentication. It just helps from those folks who are going to walk by instead of trying to hack you. Now, they don't sit in their basement in their pajamas and individually hack you. Now, some people do that, but what they use is they use AI and they use programs that are going to scan and scan and scan and scan and look for entry points, low passwords, repeating numbers on passwords. They look for multi-factor authentication use. They look for VPNs. So those three things are very important to make sure that you have that covered. Let's talk about passwords and recovery plans. Passwords are the best piece of security you can have, and most people have very poor password hygiene. How do they get the passwords? They use phishing, they use social engineering, they use brute force, they use dictionary attack. Dictionary attack is words they already know. We already talked about brute force. Social engineering is, I think I've already talked about it, but it's fake emails that get sent to you, acting as if there's somebody you know, somebody that you work with, a coworker, might be a free Starbucks. It might be a FedEx package that you're being delivered, and it's asking for information that you enter into it. The other way they get it is they get it from Facebook quizzes and Facebook posts. You know, they ask you quizzes about the 80s and the 90s because they want to know what the hot things are that you might be using, where you grew up, what street you grew up, and some of the security questions. So how do we stop them? First of all, people are the problem. We have a hygiene problem, and our passwords are a mess. I normally would ask this as a pop quiz, but I don't have time to do that today. But I want to talk about what passwords are still the most common passwords based on recovered hacks for the last 10 years. Password is still number one. 10 years of this survey being done. In 10 years, the most commonly hacked password is password. Every year, most hacks use password. Don't use password. Don't use any variation of password. Don't use password in your password, even if you think you have 15 characters. Next is QWERTY, which is the 6 characters on the keyboard, followed by the most obvious password imaginable, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So don't use those passwords. Try to be think a little bit more than that. Let's talk about how they get the passwords. They use fake emails. We talked about that. They might come from Netflix, Starbucks, Amazon, Facebook. They ask you something urgent or something free or something's overdue. They use social engineering. They use a client. They want to make a 10-1 payroll change and they forgot to send it to you. They want to add a payroll provider. They need to change a bill. They need to update their kid's address or something. And they use brute force and dictionary attacks. So how do we stop them? We make long, strong passwords. Length is strength. The longer the password, the harder it is to break. Cryptographically speaking, shorter ones, even with special characters, are still easy to break. Don't recycle your passwords. A lot of times you might use something that you think is innocuous, some password for Dunkin' Donuts or your library or something that doesn't have any of your personal information, then you reuse it because you forgot what your password was, and this is an easy one to remember. So the average person has about 120 passwords that they need to remember, or I should say 120 places that they need passwords for. Everything from banking and credit cards to social media and shopping and newspapers and all kinds of different things. But 119 places for your passwords. Don't recycle them. Don't reuse them in different places. Steer away from information about yourself. Don't use the name of a spouse, your pet, your residence, the city you live in, the place you were born. No personal identifiable information in your password and your passwords. It can be deduced from your social media accounts Facebook, those quizzes, don't do this quizzes. Use a password manager. LastPass, -lane, 1Password. The way that works is you only need to remember 2 passwords. You remember your password to get into the password manager and the password to get into your computer itself. It stores everything. It tells you if you've duplicated passwords. It tells you you should update your password. It tells you if it's been hacked. Most of these, LastPass, -lane, 1Password, have all been hacked themselves, but because they're encrypted, they get in, but they don't get the data. They haven't got the data yet. LastPass was hacked probably 6 months ago, and they got into the admin section, but they couldn't get through the encryption. So their password vault worked the way it was supposed to work. So let's go to poll question number 2. Does your firm have a cyber liability policy? So we give you a couple of minutes to do that one. Actually put these up in reverse, so bear with me when you see the next one. I think we're probably getting close to what we need.
Yep, we'll go ahead and close this out. So if you want the CPE, go ahead and answer. We'll close it out in about 3 seconds.
Okay. Does your firm have cyber liability policy? Yes, it comes with one of our insurance policies. That's 32%. And then 41% no, not that they're aware of. And 27% say yes, they do have a standalone policy. So 3/4 of you on the call don't have adequate coverage, and I'll get into why you might want to look at getting cyber insurance in the next couple of minutes. I'm going to talk very briefly about how to build a better recovery plan here. You need a recovery plan. If something happens, you need to have these 10 tips on developing your written security plan. Number 1, you have to have it in writing. You have to have it outside of your computer so that if something happens, you have to have it available to the authorities that want to see it. Your insurance company, the state, especially if you're in Massachusetts, New York, or California, they require you to have a written information security plan, and they can fine you up to $50,000 for not having it. Each state has its own security notification plan. You have to follow it if you have clients in that state. Whether you're in one state and they're in another, it's where they're located, not where you're located. You have to notify the people in the state where you're located, but also to all the other states. So if you have a bunch of different states, you need to know all the different laws. We can help you with that. We have a white paper on all the different laws. So if you want that, just let me know. So you need a disaster diary. Write it down when, why something happened. Log disruptions, identify patterns, and have an open door policy. Let your people come to you when something's happened. Identify the threats. Develop a communication plan. Who do I call? When do I call it? Review it often with your staff. Have an emergency contact. Who in the organization, inside and outside, is going to do the contacting. Record preservation. Make sure it's backed up. Make sure it's secured. Make sure you can access it. Client communication. Be proactive. It provides stickiness with your client. Portray a sense of security. Have a statement prepared so if a disaster occurs, you know what you're going to say, and provide constant updates. We all probably have had service providers. There's a major service provider in the accounting industry that did a bad job about 5 years ago where they just went dark. You don't want to leave your clients in the dark. You don't want to just shut down your website and your phones and say, we're working on a maintenance problem. You have to tell them what's going on. Let them know that that you're working on it. Protect your data. You need regulatory compliance. You need to make sure of what you have to do and what requires it. You have to have a good public perception, and you have to document your plan as granularly as possible. If you're working remotely, you have to have work from home policies to make sure that all devices are secure. You have to have endpoint security. You have to use a VPN. You have to maintain productivity to get back up quickly. You should do periodic testing, phishing training, recovery points, find out what you can lose, how long it's going to take you to come back up, what you can't afford to lose, and how much it's going to cost to if something goes down for a long period of time. You should test quarterly at the minimum. You should have insurance. You should have a cyber professional who understands the coverage. You should know what it is, where it is, how much it is, and you should understand how you can lower the premium. You should know how to file a claim. Have multiple copies of your policy and your written plan in paper, because if you're locked down and you can't get to it, it's no good. All states require a written information security plan. If you don't have one, we can give you one. So those are the tips to help you recover. Next is, don't go it alone. Do you have the right insurance coverage? The question I asked a little bit ago, people who have insurance in their professional liability policy. Our professional liability policy provides some coverage. It's not great coverage because the professional liability policy is the overlying policy, and that needs to be designed in a certain way so that it's going to respond when you have a issue where you made a mistake or you left something out or you had a timing issue. It is primarily designed, your professional liability policy, to protect your work product. It is to protect you and to pay damages and give you legal experience, legal expense, lawyers to help mitigate the claim. Cyber insurance, which is an add-on to that, does not provide you with assistance on how to get stuff done for the most part. You have to go find that stuff yourself. It also requires a professional services trigger. So it has to be because a client lost money, had damages. They file suit against you, they threaten to file suit against you. The insurance company is going to say, okay, you have $100,000 worth of coverage, you have $25,000 worth of coverage, go out and get it taken care of, and we'll pay you. Not all coverage is the same. Every insurance company has their own language in their policies. If you look at the home or auto coverage, they've been around for several hundred years, and their policy form, their policy is written the same. If you look at anybody's first 20 pages of their policy, they're exactly the same. The definitions are the same, the coverages are the same. You can add on riders and endorsements, but the policies are the same. Cyber insurance is different. Cyber insurance is, each company has their own set of definitions, their own triggers, their own exclusions, and their own claims handling. You need to have someone who knows cyber insurance to help you to determine whether you have the right coverage or not. Because the worst thing that can happen is you have some coverage, you have your insurance company said, oh, you have insurance up to the policy limits. You have $1 million, you have $1 million employee, I'm sorry, $1 million E&O policy. You have insurance up to that limit. Well, that's for damages that your clients have. That's not for your response to damages. Remember, professional liability, E&O policy is for client damages. So it's heavily weighted to client damages. It's not weighted to your response. So not all coverage is the same. Next, is your IT guy a security IT guy? Is he a break and fix guy? He gets you a new computer, he updates your software, something's not working, you call him up. Or is he somebody who's scanning for you, looking at your daily logs, can tell you that somebody was in your system at 2 o'clock in the morning, will report to you and say, hey, something's wrong. We can see that your data was exfiltrated at 2 o'clock in the morning. Was one of your guys on, or should we do something more about that? Not all IT guys are security guys. Not all IT folks specialize in preemptive. They fix and things that break. Lastly, do you know when, who, and what you need to report if you have a data breach? So if you have a data breach, you want to follow your written information security plan. You don't want to panic. You want to assess the situation, identify what's affected as quickly as possible. You want to quarantine the affected systems if at all possible to prevent software ransomware from spreading. If your computer is encrypted, unplug it from the network, but keep the power on. It may be possible for the examiners to recover the key from memory if you keep it plugged in. If ransomware is actively encrypting files, the way you can tell is if your icons on your desktop start changing to things that look like pieces of paper instead of the icons, that means they're actively encrypting everything. The best course of action is unplug the computer, remove your battery as a backup. Reset your passwords for all the cloud accounts and local domain services as quickly as possible. Notify your insurance broker. Check and evaluate your backups. Make sure you have an offline backup. Preserve the evidence. Network logs, server logs, alerts, malware, any other data that can help identify the source of the compromise. Often the logs are automatically deleted after a certain amount of time, so it's important to export the evidence as quickly as possible. Don't respond to the criminals. Activate your disaster recovery plan. And you may have ransomware payment coverage, incident response coverage, public relations support, but preserve information. Next, in review, cyber insurance has become much more difficult to qualify for. Some of the keys to take away is you need multi-factor authentication. You need it on remote access. If you're using a laptop, you need it. You need encryption. If you're using a Microsoft product and it's Windows 10 and above, you have BitLocker on your laptop. You just have to activate it. That's encrypting your hard drive. You also need to have multi-factor authentication, and you need to have encryption, as I said. And your backups use the 3-2-1 method. It's become much more difficult to qualify. Implementing some secure passwords, encryption, and remote access will help. You can get a risk assessment. The risk assessment is going to tell you where the insurance company or the IT company thinks you have vulnerabilities. All you have to do is apply for coverage to get a risk assessment. So if you are looking to get coverage, talk to your insurance broker, talk to us about a risk assessment. You can review it, you can implement the controls, and then you can put the coverage in place. Review your insurance coverage. Make sure you know what you have and how it will respond if you have a breach. Get some if you don't have it, and I urge you to start your process early if you don't have it already. Here are some additional resources, a link to our website. If you want to join our CPA alerts, we send out alerts when there's any kind of issue. Most of the information I gave you today, the statistics, comes from the FBI's IC3 website. And I also included the link here for our webinars. If you're interested in looking at our webinars, we do one a month. And then I appreciate the time. I think we have a few more minutes. I think we're at about 50 minutes. So let me just this one up.
Yeah, we do need
to get. If we have questions.
Yeah, we do need to get the third poll question.
Oh, about the third poll question.
Yeah.
All right, which password is most secure? These are all passwords that I've used in the past. And I'll give you some explanation of these in a minute. Let's see if anybody can figure out which is the most secure.
And if you do need the CPE, you do need to answer this because we did only have 3 poll questions total. So answer away. We'll get this closed up in about 5 more seconds. All right, and I will share those results.
Okay, so question number 1, Rob F at 1327. 39% said they thought that was it. Obi Truck Blues, not very many people. Password, not very many people. And then 37 for the last one there. So 14 of you got the correct answer. But let me go through these. Rob F 1327 with the @ sign would take about 2 months to crack by computer. It would take about 2 months because it has a common word. It's too short and it only has 1 symbol. The next one actually takes longer because it's longer characters. So it won't be hacked as often, but Obi is my dog's name. I drive a F-150 and my favorite music is the blues. So that's a password that I used for a while. But I no longer use it. That would take 4 months. It has known words. That's the problem with that one. The next one, it's way too common. It would take 16 seconds to crack that. And then the last one actually says baby James born 0518. The slide I have right now, that's James and Papa. We're at 5 guys. And baby James was born May 5th, 2000. May 18th. That one takes 16 years because it's 15 characters and it has no vowels, so there's no words in the dictionary. So that one, if you can take out all the letters and make it all the vowels and make it more than 16 digits, that's the best password you can use. And that is my information there. If you want to contact me, you can call me, you can email me if you have any questions. Also, I think there's a few questions in the chat in the question box.
Yeah, so there was one in here, Rob, that said, would you be able to provide a link to the cyber policy by state? Do you have that handy that you could throw in the chat?
I don't, but I can send it to you and then you can get it out to the folks.
Okay, sure. Yep, we can do that. And then there's one that says how to make sure that if clients upload documents on SharePoint, if it contains a virus from their computer. So basically, and how do you, how can we, I guess, protect that?
So SharePoint, my understanding is that is encrypted when it goes up there. So when you brought it down, it shouldn't have a virus in it. It shouldn't go in if it has a virus. But you'd have to ask an IT person that question as opposed to me, the insurance guy.
Okay. And then that was it. There's a couple of questions about whether or not they actually got the poll. Kathy, let me know if you did not see all 3 of those polls. And then same thing, Brad, just confirm that one way or the other. If we have this communication here, then I can at least justify the certificate. So a couple other things I did throw into the chat just while we were, while Rob was presenting. I did throw in the links that he shared on this last, his last slide or next to the last slide, and including his email, although the email was the last one. It was a hyperlink in the presentation, so that's why it has all that information behind it. So it's just Rob R. Ferrini at McGowanprofessional.com. Then I did also put into the chat a template that we pulled from the IRS Security Summit. It's a WISP template that you can also download. In our first session, the caveat was thrown out there, probably should do that as well for this one. And that is, make sure that you take that, if you use that template, make sure you take that template and customize it for your business. Because if you just put in your company name and change out a couple things here and there, then it's not your written information security plan. It's just your name on a security plan that needs to be customized for your business. I also included the link to our YouTube channel and then the slide deck as well. These things will also be included in the follow-up email that you receive. And again, just as a reminder on the CPE, you will receive an email. Email is going to have a survey link, and that you'll need to complete that survey in order to have your CPE sent to you, the certificate sent to you. If there's no other questions, which I don't believe there are, let's see, how can I get the template? It's in the chat. And then a couple of people said they did not get the first polling question. We can address that. But again, as long as you communicated here and the time stamps show that you were in session, then I can at least justify issuing that certificate. I will put that poll back in the, not the poll, I'll put the slide deck back in the chat one more time. You should see that there now. And there you go. I'll leave this open for about another few more seconds here. Then we will let Rob get about his day. And we certainly appreciate your time, Rob. Thank you for sharing all this great information. And if you could send me that link, we'll get that link out to people as well.
Yeah, I'll send that to you as soon as we get off the call. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, everybody, for joining in. And again, if you have questions, I'm always available.
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks to everybody for joining us. We'll see you in the next session. Thank you.